Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Matt Jahans, Director of Cinema Technology, Harkness Screens, and Mr. Richard Michel, VP Global Marketing and Commercial Development, Harkness Screens. We're going to be talking about why maintaining presentation quality matters. So can we welcome these two gentlemen with a big round of applause?
So we've heard this morning all about experience, about presentation. We really want to try and encourage more of exhibition. What they come into the market. I always say nobody remembers the band, nobody remembers a rainy day. Maybe in the UK, if it rains, it's just a standard day, one really doesn't think about it. Nobody remembers a boring meal, which disappears out of their brain. Who remembers average? As a very big cricket fan, it's fun to be able to put pictures up on the screen. Three English spinners from the 1990s. You won't remember any of them. Maybe the one in the middle, you can touch it, back to continuous round apart for days. Nobody remembers average cricket. We do, back home we do. Nothing. It's for the best we can have. But people remember great, remember brilliance. The two best cricketers of the last century. They'll never ever be forgotten. And the same applies to cinema. When we go to the cinema, we have a great experience. We always remember it. Whether it's the content, whether it's the immersive audio, whether it's the 3D content. Never ever forget the experience. We go home and tell people about it. It's that. This is funny enough, a picture of my son. I really didn't understand the word immersive, what it really meant. He was about 4 or 5 months old. And back home, every favourite TV show comes on, and he runs over to the stand, his hands on the counter, and watches from like that close to the TV. And I couldn't really understand it for ages. And then all of a sudden, while I'm suddenly thinking about it, because he wants to be immersed, he wants to be put inside this cartoon. It's his inherent nature as a human being that we have. We smell everything, touch everything, want to see everything in our environment. He still does it. He's done this for years. Every morning the same thing over and over again. Cinema is no different. He wants to show you immersed. Now people will tell you that through cinema is reclining, shaking seats, laser projection. But actually, fundamentally, this excitement kind of recliner so long. All of these things make for cinema potentially a lot more exciting than today. But fundamentally, for shaking seats, for reclining seats, for in-theatre dining, what do they spend most of their time doing? It's looking at the screen. It's fundamentally sat watching content and seeing the audience that goes with it. And nothing else matters. If you can't do that bit right, have the best seats in the world, have the best theatre planning, have the best lobbies, they're not going to come off the roof. Most important part to get right. Not just vision, but it's audio as well. And the guys who are up were saying that is it. I'm going to hand over to Matt, and Matt's going to show you some of the ways from a deep cinema and deep cinema perspective to actually monitor and maintain that quality, ensure that people keep getting an experience they'll remember.
Thank you, Richard. So I'd like to follow on with what Richard's been saying. Myself personally and all the team at Harkness Screens, we have a real pride in what we call screen monitoring. But when we say screen, we're actually meaning the whole auditorium, the theatre. So we're talking the image on the screen, we're talking about the audio, we're talking about the whole experience. So we try to look at some ways to understand how this can be maintained and look at some ways how we can help our customers, help our partners to make this happen. So what do we mean? as I've just explained, good presentation quality. It's the whole cinema experience. So we need to keep this good. Now, at the moment, things have very much changed. So many cinemas around the world are digital cinema. In fact, most cinemas are digital cinema. So we have D-cinema, we have E-cinema. But we don't always have the skilled staff to manage this at the moment. So in many territories, we're monitoring the quality with network operation centers, NOC centers. So these are, remote setups where people can dial in and check. Many other places will have annual or every 6 months an engineer visit coming in, so this is great, we can check the quality of the equipment. But what happens in between? So we have these time periods where no one's monitoring your cinemas necessarily. Sometimes you may have some very good staff members on site, sometimes you may not, so it's not always the case. So who's going to be checking these things? We've got screen brightness and the brightness uniformity. You may see an image on screen, but is it as bright as we would like it to be? The quality of the image itself, the focus, the colors. A very skilled projectionist will look at this and say, okay, that image is on screen, but the focus isn't good, the colors are off. Do we always have these people still here to do this? I would say we don't in many cases, and this is all around the world I see this. Audio quality, we've just had an excellent panel talking about audio. It's the same thing. Someone can put their ear into the cinema and say, yes, the sound's working, but 3 speakers could be blown. They could be like this for, 1 day or a year, and do we always know this? So, how can we actually try and monitor this and see what happens? So the worst thing that can happen if we don't try and do this is we sometimes hear bad comments. Now, thankfully, I hear very good comments. All around the world, I see some fantastic cinemas, and occasionally I see some that are not so good. So these are some of the bad comments, and this is what we're up against as exhibitors and cinema partners. So I don't like the screen because it's dark at the edges. This is not what we want to hear. I find 3D movies too dark, difficult to enjoy. Now, I know good 3D looks fantastic, but I've seen appalling 3D, and it really doesn't look good. So we need to make sure we can keep this looking good. And worst of all, which was touched on earlier, I get a better experience at home. The last thing we want doing is people neglecting cinema and, and staying at home and watching. Now, thankfully, I know it's nice to see in India. This is often not the case. I've been on a few visits here, and about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, an absolutely packed auditorium. I'd never see this in the UK, so that's great to see. But it's still a worry. We've got to make sure people really do still want to do this. So the worst thing, of course, is revenue. It's bad enough having an empty cinema, but it's going to hit the bottom dollar. So we need to do this to keep the cinemas profitable, to keep us in business, and to keep the industry alive, of course. So what can we do? And this is really going to depend on what staff are in your cinemas, and this will vary from site to site. If you have very well-trained staff already, great. Most of the problems are already sorted out. But you may have staff there that are competent with a bit of training to do a few extra tasks so we can actually help monitor this. So measuring light levels, it's something I'm very passionate about. I love to watch a movie with very good, correct bright levels. So you could have someone going in and looking at this or measuring it. Subjective screen condition checks. You could have fantastic light, great image, but the screen's torn, or there's, Coca-Cola's been spilt on it, milk's on the screen. We do get this in our cinemas, of course. So, what can we do about that? Can we check that and identify these problems? The image quality itself, I touched on focus, for example. Can the staff be trained to see what looks, very good, sharp focus, or when it's starting to go soft and going out? In many cases, this can be done, and thankfully it's already being done. And audio checks themselves, the classic example, the untrained guy just hears, yep, the sound's working, everything's great, but really is it? Are all the channels working correctly? Is it at the right decibel levels? Or has a channel completely gone down? So these are the things we need to look at. Can we train guys to do this? Now, I mentioned light measurement. So, you know, staff can be trained to actually use light measurement tools. You can look at the screen, of course you can, and see the brightness, or you put up a white test pattern, but if you can actually measure that brightness, then we can really take it to a next level and check. So there's some example tools there. There's a spectroradiometer. Typically an engineer would be using this, but cinema staff can use more low-cost equipment very easily. So in the center you can see Harkness's iPhone app, the digital screen checker, and digital screen verifier, and on the far right is the digital screen checker, which is another handheld unit not using an iPhone. You can literally point and shoot at a test pattern and check the light levels, so useful things to do. Now, with cinema brightness, of course, what are those light levels? Now, an example I've shown on the screen now is the brightness standard for 2D for D cinema. So we're looking for 14-foot Lamberts in the center and a sensible drop-off at the edges. So, you know what your targets are, and if you can't always achieve these types of targets, what's an acceptable target to your cinema? This is what we're looking for. And just maintain, is that standard still there? On day one with a brand new lamp, the brightness could be very good. As the lamp ages and drops off, this can dip. So do keep an eye on that. Does that lamp need to be changed or not? This is the sort of thing we're looking for. And the other thing, when you're measuring light, it's very key to measure it from the correct position in the auditorium. So the image on the right shows you a seat in a geometric center of the seating area. And this is where we should always measure light from. So it's important for several reasons. If it's in the center of the auditorium, in that seating area, center of the seating area, should I say, then what we're really seeing is a good, even experience for everyone in that seating area, not just the guy sat in the premium seat. And often center seats are the premium seats, of course. So that's a very key consideration. Also, if you have staff measuring light, you don't want one guy measuring the light from one seat, and a month later someone checks from 4 seats along. You'll get a different light reading just from being in a different position. So that's very important as well. So the key thing is, once we've got this set up, we may have the staff trained, we've got a good setup. How do we actually maintain that and monitor that? So over time, how can we take this to the next level? So first of all, we have to understand what factors are we looking for, what are we trying to monitor. So I've spoken about many of these already. So underpowered projection equipment, this may be a case that everyone's doing the best they can, the equipment's been installed correctly, the staff are doing the right thing, but perhaps it's underpowered. Maybe you should have had a higher lamp wattage, or for some reason a smaller projector's in with the wrong size auditorium, these types of things. I mentioned xenon lamps. Xenon lamps age. They can look great at the start of life, and they definitely drop off as the age of the lamp goes on. Have you got the correct lamp, of course? You may have the correct lamp, it may be of a good age, looking good, but if it's misaligned, are the staff trained to align those lamps, to get the best spread of light? These are all things to be considered. We've touched on focus, of course. Is the image nice and sharp as it should be? Color correction, when we're talking digital cinema, are those color coordinates being correctly entered? If not, again, you could have the wrong colors, the image doesn't look as it should. The screens itself can age. Over time, you may have a screen which looks very good. It may have been damaged with environmental effects, dust, drinks, beverages put on the screens, this type of thing. Does the screen need changing? Again, these are things that can be looked at. And the theatre design itself is an interesting one. Sometimes you may have fantastic equipment, great cinema screen, brilliant movie content, but you could have a poor theatre design. So in Europe, much to my annoyance, I often see very short throw cinemas sometimes. And of course, it's not a very good experience for all the guys sitting in the seats. So there's different things, and that's out of your control necessarily, but these are definitely things to consider as well. And audio issues, the panel have talked extensively on that. We must keep the audio sounding very good as well, it's so important. So Harkness have introduced a new range of products. So I won't talk too much about the products, but I'll give you a brief introduction to them. So we have our QALIF monitoring suite. So QALIF is Latin for light management, but it does so much more than just manages the light. So I'm just going to introduce you to some of the products in this range. So we have a suite of solutions, and some of these products are Harkness products, some others are from our partner HDS, Highland Technology Solutions. We now have the global license for their cinema monitoring products, so this is a very interesting thing for us. And we have a range of products to sort all sorts of sizes of cinemas, so whether you're a one-screen cinema just using e-cinema, or you're a very large multiplex with dual projectors, we can cover them all with different products within the range. Here we go. So here's the products we're talking about. So if I start on the right, just to introduce you, we've seen already the digital screen checker, a very, very low-cost unit which can be used by semi-trained staff to point at the screen and check the light levels. I've mentioned also the digital screen verifier, which is essentially an iPhone app of the same product. But then we move into the next range of products, which are the QALIF range, which are brought into the QUROLUX suite now. So these work in a very different way. These are actually interfaced with the actual D-Cinema system. So you've already got your server, the projector on a certain IP range. These units will be wall-mounted on the wall, networked to the projector and the server, and they can talk to these units, and there can be remote monitoring involved. So they can do a lot of interesting tasks. So first of all, we've mentioned the screen checker. One slide there just showing that you can enter the light readings into any management software. We have a digital screen archiver is one way it can be done, just to record those readings. It's very useful to track how it happens on time. Even if you just use a notepad, a spreadsheet, whatever you want to do record these measurements. It's ever so important. So the facts on this particular unit itself, we can use it handheld or tripod mounted. Has very accurate readings, but the thing to bear in mind with this unit, it's a center reading only, so we're purely measuring that center screen. Measures between 0 and 35-foot Lamberts, and it's good for 2D and 3D. As with many light meters, you can put 3D eyewear in front and a 3D filter, and you can check the 3D light levels. And I've mentioned already that it can be entered into software, so this is a very useful piece of equipment. Then, of course, we've said about the iPhone app, the digital screen verifier works very much in the same way, although you can automatically upgrade the readings into this particular software, but it still works as a great standalone manual tool. This one's not tripod mounted, of course, it's an iPhone, it's just typically going to be handheld, held up to the screen. Again, it has a good range of light measurement and can work for 2D and 3D as before. It is only for iPhone, I must state. It's not for Android platforms at the moment, purely because there's too many cameras to try and calibrate, which is what it uses. And again, it's very low cost and can simply be downloaded from the App Store. So these are the very simple tasks, the very simple units. So if I move on now to the QALIF units, the Optimizer Lite is the first one, which is the lower end unit. When I say lower end, it's still a very premium piece of equipment. And the image to the right of it is just showing how it's been integrated into some NOC software. So should you want to use it, you could dial in remotely if you have more than one cinema and see what's happening and interrogate the data of what it's measuring. So what does it actually measure? What can it do for you as an exhibitor? So it's a fixed unit, as I've explained, so it'll be mounted on the back wall of the auditorium so it can be out of the way from any tampering hands. And it does automated functions. And how it actually works, it works in the same concept as when you're making up a movie playlist. So you essentially create a DCP. You just make a playlist and you could run it weekly or every day, and you could just call it QALIF Optimizer Test Playlist. And any of the features I'm going to talk about, they simply work with macro cues on the server. So make up a playlist to say measure light, measure audio, whatever these features are, and it can be run automatically with no staff member there if needs be. So it measures a single point of light at the center of the screen, which is very useful. It then has automatic light measurement and management. So this works in exactly the same way as a light lock on a digital projector. So it will detect what the light level is. If it deems it needs to be higher or lower, it can interface with the projector power supply and raise that up or bring it down if needs be. Then it overwrites the lamp file on the projector and saves that for the next day. So this is a very useful feature in itself. Now it also does an audio check. So although you can't actually calibrate the audio in a theatre from the back wall, what you can do when you install one of these units is have it calibrated already using a regular sound pressure meter by a sound engineer, and then you can say, yep, this is okay, the sound sounds good on the day of installing our unit. Then we just play a sound of pink noise through each of those speaker channels, and we record that as a reference. So all of these units mounted on the back wall will know what perfect audio sounds like from its mounted position, and it tested against what was recorded on the day when it was performing good. So again, you can look at things and you can see if the decibel level's not as it is, or if the speaker channel's blown. I mean, one example I had in the UK, I was demonstrating this product to a customer, and he's a very good guy. He has much pride in his audio and the visual image, and I was testing it for him, and when we set it up there, we ran this pink noise around all the channels, and funny enough, it showed that one of the speakers was out. There was 0 decibels, and you know, this guy is saying, I'm very proud, there's no way one of my speakers can't be working. So we all walked into the theatre, played the noise around the speakers, and lo and behold, one of the speakers had blown. So, you know, this could have been like that for a year or several months. So it's quite useful to notice subtle changes and record it. And the final point on there is showing remote monitoring to the NOx system, for example. So if you are using this equipment, you can interrogate it remotely and look at reports and see what it's giving you, or give it out to your engineers or service company. So the next unit takes it up to another level. This is the QALIF optimizer. It works in very much the same way, and it can be networked in exactly the same way. So how it works, on the back wall as before, it has automated functions through the server playlist, as I explained, same as the other ones. But unlike the other one, just looking at the center reading in the middle, this one actually takes a 144-point reading of light. So when it looks at the screen, because it has a camera lens, it looks at the screen as a whole, and it breaks the screen down into a 144-point grid. So you can see what the brightness is, you can see where the hot spot is, you can see is it brighter on one side or the other. It gives a lot of information. It's very useful, very accurate readings. In the same way as the previous unit, it's automated management, so it talks to the digital projector power supply, it can raise that current up and down, overwrite the lamp files. But the real key additional feature this product does, it actually does an automated lens focus. So it talks to the projector, it plays its own test pattern through the server onto the screen, and the QALIF unit looks at this image on the screen. Then it talks to the motorized lens on the projector. It moves the lens all the way one way, all the way the other way 3 times, and it looks at how the image on the screen changes as it goes out of focus. So it's essentially looking at the contrast of that image. And then it looks to see where was the best position. Then it looks at it, moves the lens back to that position, and it saves it and overwrites the lens file on the projector. So next time you switch the projector on, that focus position is saved. So that's a very important thing, because we all know when we change movie formats each day, we're going from, say, CinemaScope to widescreen. It changes, the lens won't always go back to the same position over time. And it, you know, and it saves having to have an engineer in every week or something. You know, it's a very useful feature. As before, it also monitors audio, which is obviously a very useful feature, but this one has a more sophisticated microphone, so it doesn't only monitor the decibel level, you can also look at the spectral path, the spectral level of each channel, so you can actually see the EQ curve. And again, it can be remote monitored, as I've said. Then we move up to the final unit in this range, which is the QALIF Ultimate. And it is really ultimate by name, ultimate by nature. It has so many good functions. So this is really a product for premium large format cinemas or cinemas with dual projectors. It is a very high-end product. So same way as before, mounts on the back wall. It's fully networked and it works through the server playlist for all of its functions. It measures light in the same way as before, 144 points. So it looks at the whole screen. It's the brightness and the uniformity. Very accurate light readings. And again, it talks to the projector power supply. It can raise that lamp light level if it needs to. That's no problem. Now, the new thing this one can do now is contrast and color measurement. So it actually has a spectro within it. So if you ever see your engineers coming in and shooting the colors, it will project colored test patterns up, RGB, white, and contrast test patterns, and it will monitor those, and it will check the RGB coordinates, the XY coordinates. But unlike what an engineer typically does when he's measuring in your cinema, he will measure those colors and then type them into the software for your Barco, NEC, Christie projector and record those. This unit will talk directly to the projector, and if you want it to, it can directly overwrite those color files. So it overwrites the MCGD files. So again, it's a very useful thing, and this happens automatically. It can also help with screen color convergence. can't do it fully automatically because these are tasks which involve, knobs on the LITE engine or Allen keys on the projector, but it can assist the engineer in doing this task. That's quite useful. It does lens focus in the same way as the previous unit. And again, it does audio like the previous unit, so we're looking at decibel levels and the spectral EQ. So these are just a few screenshots of what I'm talking about. So the units that you mount them on the back wall, you can dial into them via VNC with an iPad or a computer and look at what's happening, or you could look at these as remote reports, dialing in remotely. So the image on the top left is showing the 144 points of light, so you can see where the hot spot is, if it's to the left or the right, the up or down, and what the level is in each of those points. On the top right, you can see a screenshot of the decibel levels. You can see each individual channel there and what that decibel level is. The bottom right is showing a collection of screenshots where the lens focus was taking place, and you can see the different images where it's in focus and out of focus, so that's very useful. And on the right, bottom right, is just showing an example of a server playlist where it's showing, CUROLUX playlist, run this each morning, so that's a very useful feature. So I'm just going to hand back to Richard now, who's going to just conclude on the last few slides. So, thank you, Richard.
So, as I think you've seen, and you're probably aware, presentation quality diminishes very quickly over time in this country. Things go wrong in lecture regularly. Matt's giving you some examples today, we regularly go out to customers. But it creates a happy customer. As I said at the start, plans of this period do not want back. You can make a visual experience impressive. Audiences go away, they take it to social, they tweet. Not social, they put it to Facebook. And it makes me interested in why your presentation is so much better. There are things to do after presentation quality, despite what might look like selfies, to highlight that the parties are there. People in good presentations, they will keep coming back. Several exhibitors across Europe are renowned for their presentation quality and their box office revenue growing markets that are actually. And whilst you know that there are underpowered projectors, old equipment, there is one power projector that are coming to the end of their life. You know you can't solve every problem, but you can stop investing. So do come and see Matt live. We're around this afternoon. Our team in India are at the various parameters. So do talk to us about our party. Whatever it is you do, something by on your presentation does matter. And with that, if there's any question, grab us even now, but I'm sure place for lunch everybody. Let's stop at lunch. We're around, we won't keep any longer, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I'm going to quickly request Mr. Raghav to present Mr. Matt Jahans and Mr. Richard Michel, the small token of our appreciation for being here today and giving us that very informative presentation. Thank you so much. It would be wonderful if you can just move to the center of the stage so we can just get a nice photo of the three gentlemen on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause. Come on.